Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle Martech Leadership Forum, Smarter Tech for Marketing Success. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Spann, Associate Director of Marketing Communications at Align Technology. We're excited to have Deshilla and our panelists with us here for a panel discussion called Build, Borrow, Buy, Thinking Through Martech Procurement. Welcome, Deshilla. Over to you.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to have this panel discussion and be able to share some expertise from this talented group of individuals. As Eric said, I'm Spann, Associate Director of Marketing Communications at Align Technology. I have over 20 years of experience in marketing technology, and I'm excited to talk to this powerhouse group who's going to share with you some of their insights as well. So to get us started, I'm going to have go around the virtual table and have the group introduce themselves. But also, I'd like for each person to, when you're introducing yourself, share with us one of the most innovative Martech procurements you've ever had. And let's start with Jill.
Thank you. My name is Jill Delaney. I am the Global Marketing Technology Director at Bronability. We're a mobility solutions manufacturing company based in Sweden. I and my team manage our marketing technology stack as far as strategy, selection, implementation, and sometimes even usability, including everything from our websites, marketing automation tools, SEO, data analytics, paid search and social media, etc. Prior to Bronability, I have many years experience in the security industry, leading digital and technology teams for companies like Tyco Security Products or Johnson Controls and Dormakaba. So I'm going to use my most recent experience because it's top of mind and probably a challenge that other people are also facing, which is CDP. So it's probably also been one of the largest procurements and selection processes that I've gone through recently, and making sure that we're really truly leveraging our first party data, that we're connecting all of our data platforms into one, and that we're able to deliver the right messages to the right customers at the right time. And if you're anything like our company and organization, you inherit some data challenges, whether that's data quality, data management, how the data connects to disparate data systems. And so really evaluating CDP and making sure that we have the right solution in place for the future for our business units, and that we are able to have that universal profile that we can truly deliver that customized, personalized message to the customer. But we can get into more of that later. Thank you.
Welcome, Jill. And Steve?
Yeah, my name is Stephen Nee. I'm the head of marketing and communications here at Klockner Metals. We are a metals distributor. So if any one of you guys need metals, we will deliver it to you somehow. So very exciting industry. I actually made a career, not by choice, but to work for a lot of legacy industries. So we're generally, everyone jokes that the steel industry is about 20 years behind the rest of the world. Before that, I was in healthcare, which is lags sometimes as well as academia, and I was also in heavy construction equipment. So the most innovative piece of technology essentially is, I always think, is enterprise. So just to put things in perspective or scale, our company is about 2,200 employees. So I guess technically we are mid-size. So it is, when you're a small to mid-sized company and you're trying to scale up, I think that's obviously it's a massive challenge at working for a company with 5,000, 10,000 plus. But when it comes to like companies our size, 2,300 and even smaller, and scaling up and implementing an enterprise software, I don't think you're just used to that in general, where you're even thinking about what that scale actually looks like and connecting the dots and understanding who needs to be involved. I think, you know, like I think when you're in a small or mid-sized mindset, sometimes I've noticed that it's all about just, oh, everyone could use this tool, and not really working through the different profiles of the procurement process to deal with that. So I do really enjoy trying to implement that enterprise-wide and really thinking about it from all the user perspective.
Thanks, Stephen. And last but not least, Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Langan. I currently work at Digitas, which is part of the Publicis family, as an associate director in marketing operations. I have been with Digitas going on 5 years, but previously I have worked on the corporate side over 10 years, working with different marketing technologies and technology ecosystems, mainly in the financial sector and also manufacturing, which we probably share some common pain points, Stephen. But I've really seen technology evolve immensely through these years, right? Through these 15 years, I'm sure we all have seen the growth, right? And what that kind of presents some challenges in organizations really to help identify what the right technology that fits their current needs and future needs. But also, how do you go through that RFP and procurement process, which we're talking about today? But then also, how do you socialize it? How will you get all these new technologies? How do you socialize it through your organization? So at Digitas, we really partner with our clients to help achieve success through all of these steps. Now, part of the innovation, I'm not sure I would say it's the most innovative piece of Martech. I personally believe innovation is really about how an organization uses technology, and that can really come through creative solutions to help solve a challenge. And we all probably have very unique, but maybe similar challenges that we face. Something that I have seen reoccurring through these many years has been running multiple CRM systems. So I have been faced personally in multiple organizations where I've been faced with B2C and B2B. And commonly you're running two different CRMs, and that's the less is more sometimes. So one thing that I have seen recently is technology has probably heard that need and really has been able to expand that flexibility of partitioning the data and the LOBs. So one of the things that I've helped most is large organizations do migrations of then transforming B2B and B2C to one common platform.
Thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it. As you can see, we have a diverse group of experts to talk through all of this. And one of the questions that we wanted to discuss was really around how do you make a decision, when you're procuring Martech? And also a question that has matched our thoughts has come in from the audience as well. So I'm going to read that one because I think it's right on par with where we want to go in this discussion. As an organization can struggle to determine what Martech solutions to invest in, do you have any advice on how we can pick the right solution to get the right ROI? And Stephen, I'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it went back to kind of something I alluded to earlier. It's like a really understanding of the different audience types and the different internal stakeholders that are going to be involved. Like for my organization, marketing is a brand new department. We've been around since 1903. The marketing department started with me in 2019. So we are a little bit late to the game. So when it comes to some of that stuff, so they're really educating like the executive team and sales team with that kind of technology. And so it is really like, who is your target audience? What are your goals? How does it align with the company goals? And how can we like communicate that, especially when folks aren't understanding what you kind of do or in that nature. That's basically one of my challenges is like, okay, we know we need, like when they hired me, they were like, oh, we know we need someone like you based on what the consultants recommended, but we don't really understand what you guys do to a certain extent. And so and being in a legacy industry is my job is to really understand is like what piece of technology, understanding also the challenges internally with the resources. So we have a really small team. So there's lots of great tools out there, but they might be more complex. You might need more hands on deck. And so, for our team, we're a small team. We got to be agile. We got to learn it really quickly. We got to master it really quickly. So yeah, we got to be super scrappy all the time. And so, like to invest in a software that might be more robust, or can do like all those bells and whistles, but if you don't have the bandwidth to do that, then it's going to be, it's going to be fruitless as well. So you got to really factor in utilization of the tool, adaptation of the tool, who needs to buy in, why they need to buy in, and really understand like how it's going to take you from point A to point B. Like there's also life cycles within, each tool set too, like, this will get us from, point A to point B, and then we can consider something else. Now that our team has grown, we're more aligned enterprise wide. So there's so many different variable factors that you really have to kind of sit down and just not rush into something just because these technology companies have really great salespeople that can sell you the world. And so don't get sucked in, and like, just be skeptical and really think about like your use case and apply it to that.
That was a great point, Stephen. And I wonder, Jamie, if you could also add some perspective from, you've been on the client side and now on the agency side. What do you see are some of the things that your clients should be thinking about in this process?
So I really just want to echo, Stephen, I think you were spot on when you talk about utilization. I think the other thing that, one of the things that we were brainstorming within the group earlier is really if you're looking at a best-in-class solution that is a one-off to a particular need versus an integrated suite. So if you make the investment into the integrative suite, what is that roadmap to that utilization? Is it that you're making an upfront investment, knowing that your needs for the next 5 years, or are you just going to do these one-off kind of plugins? You really need to look at the whole ecosystem, because again, do you have the proper readiness in your organization to staff these different technologies? Are you going to have to outsource them? Are they open enough technologies that as different problems occur, can you have really a hybrid model where you're buying but also developing, right? So really looking at technology from the back end capabilities too to help you grow. But I think I can't stress the importance of not being reactive to a certain problem. I think a lot of what I've seen is a lot of people get caught up in this homegrown system where only duct tape and glue can get you so far, right? So you kind of have to pull the plug on that. You're gonna be scrappy, you're gonna face some pain points, but you really need to look to your roadmap for that future investment and knowing that you're gonna overcome these hurdles and come out better on the other side.
Jill, anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I think they're both spot on, right? But just a couple points that I think from our perspective or from what we try to do, and I think that starts with mapping our tech stack, our marketing tech stack, to the business strategy and objectives. And sometimes those are changing depending on the market and in different regions or different needs and channels. And I think Stephen and even Jamie both said it as, what audiences are we reaching? How is our existing marketing tech stack performing? Are we effectively reaching those audiences with that tech stack? What are we measuring? So it's kind of that current state versus future state, but I'm always ensuring that we're mapping that back up to what are the overall business goals and strategies. And then I think Stephen also and Jamie alluded to the fact of, I say people, processes, technology, and sometimes it's reverse, right? You get all the tech stack and you get that approved and you forget to think about the people and the processes that have to go in place. And so making sure that you do have that implementation plan and that you do have the proper workflows in place and the resources, whether they're internal or external, and all of the key stakeholders along the way that play a role. Because a technology is great, but you have to have the right people running and managing it and really aligning cross-functionally to make sure it's fully optimized. And I guess the last piece I'll add to that, kind of tying back to the business values, is we use something that's like a business value discovery tool. To really make sure that we're mapping that ROI back and that we have that data point to prove to senior leadership, is this spend worth it? Are we going to get return? And how are we measuring our customer acquisition and retention from that?
So Jill, I want to stick with you a little bit on some of the comments you made, because you talked a little bit about not only within your organization or within your company that what you would do, but also, engaging with your stakeholders and other individuals who would benefit from it. So one of the questions we often get asked, when we're looking at procuring, is what should you do internally up front before you even think about it? So what is some of that work? And some of that work happens with, what I always say, evangelizing what you want to do across the organization. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you have to do some internal work before you even start thinking about procuring that Martech solution?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it starts with just socializing and educating our internal teams. And so it's not just getting the marketing team or my team on board with what is our strategy, kind of the why behind. So always the context, but it's also IT, it's legal, it's procurement, it's sales, it's every aspect of the company in some areas. And as you said, those cross-functional department relationships are so key in ensuring that they understand our vision and what we need from a marketing standpoint so they can properly plan. And I think the sooner the better for that. I started at Bronability in January, and that was kind of one of the first things out of the gate is how can I formulate and build these relationships with these different departments and make sure they're truly aligned with what is our Martech strategy, what are our goals, and then what is that process and timeline. And so I think Stephen had mentioned this in some of our prior discussions of sometimes those policies and procedures, they don't exist, or they're different in different business units. And so you kind of have to figure out how to navigate that best internally to make sure that everybody is aboard your plan and that they have the proper resources and information to help you make those decisions and help champion that project all the way up to C-suite. So I think it's that ongoing feedback and communication network. Certainly there's a lot more that goes into that internally with meetings and different stakeholder teams and task force and those different things that get formulated. But I think just making sure that they're educated and bought in, and that you formulate those relationships with the key stakeholders across the business can go a long way.
Great. Jamie or Stephen, anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like each organization has its own unique challenges, like internally, right? And so I think you really have to consider that. Like you really have to consider, like, is it really important for people to understand what you're talking about? Like for me, like I like to plant the seed of talking in general concepts so they don't get latched onto anything particularly. Like, I'm not, or if I already know that this is a piece of software, like, yeah, it is really internalizing, communicating, like winning that process. I really think about like, like I always think about the kids who are like, oh, I want a dog. And so, they work their way up to their parents. Like they convince one parent and the other parent, they just keep on planting that seed over and over again. And honestly, like sometimes like an organization can react quick, but I'm sure the larger the organization, the more the processes and the timeline just keeps on continuing to grow. So like I don't know, like like for me, like when I was first started at this organization, it was more scrappy and we were kind of agile, which is really nice to like move really fast. But then obviously you realize that there's some dangers in moving really fast and not going through a proper internalization and involving every single party. But like yeah, like you really have to kind of really sit down and take a step back and audit that and really not just rush into that decision. But if you do see how it aligns with your company goals, how it's going to be an asset to their things, and how you don't see how it's going to be other challenges for just all those implementation process, then you need to start like basically promoting it, like promoting that concept and really selling that roadmap as quickly as possible to get buy-in. Otherwise, you could lose that energy. Like our industry, we also have one of these challenges where it's a commodity business. So, things are great and then things are really bad. So money, like, we don't like when it comes to budgeting, it's not always like, oh, you budgeted this, so you definitely get that. Sometimes we have to be reactive with our spend as well. And I'm sure some industries have that challenge as well. And so that money could go away one day. So, I work with this also, rushed timeline as well, to a sense that, that budget approval might go away one day, but at the same time, like, how crucial it is to implement in a greater scheme, like, if you can be pragmatic about it and just go one by one. So you just really have to understand how you prioritize and sell that concept all the way up the ladder as well.
Yeah, I think just one thing to add is when you're thinking about these larger investments is making sure you have a champion on the projects, making sure that you have C-level buy-in. That's also could be a dual role for this champion, making sure that you're able to communicate up to C-level in a very concise manner. They don't want to hear all the noise. They don't want to hear all the conversations. So it is going to become really, you have to have all the different spokes of the wheel, right? You're going to have somebody from finance on your side. Think about the end users, as Stephen and Jill were saying, the people actually in the tool. Is it going to be feasible for them to ramp up? Having all technology, how does this fit into the larger ecosystem? Does that present challenges? These are all things you want to consider when you're in RFPing, when you're even selecting vendors to RFP, because you really cut down on just wasteful time, right? Where people don't have additional time to sit through all these vendor meetings. So really vet out who you want to send this RFP and making sure everybody has questions to ask from all different sides.
Yeah, I think you guys gave all good input on that. And I know, the theme of this discussion is around build, borrow, or buy. And probably all of us have been through it where we've gone in, we have a piece of technology that we want to get the buy-in from those stakeholders and have someone champion. And we've been asked the question, well, can we build it in-house? Is there a third party, that we could actually leverage? Do we really need to buy and implement? So I'd love to hear from each of you. How do you make those decisions when you're thinking about what you're looking to bring in as your Martech solution? And I'll start with you, Jamie.
So I think one of the biggest things is to look at, what is the potential utilization within the organization against the investment. So, and what those needs are. So if you're looking at a CRM, there's high visibility, but you could probably get away with licensing because your end client's not going to really care what CRM you're using as long as you're using it properly. When you're looking at the other side of the chart, it's really looking at that quadrant of if you have an app that is very specific to your business needs, there's probably not one out there that's going to fix that, all solve for all the solutions that you may have. So you may choose to make that investment. When you're looking at whether you're building or buying, you also really need to think of what your resources are. Do you have a staffing plan to uphold all the changes in something that you're building? Because no one's going to know that product. So do you have the investment to really manage that ongoing? What I like to recommend is there a hybrid solution? Can you find a product that has an open up source plan where you can build some things? You can have these API connectors that you build, but you don't really need to maintain them, or it doesn't take as much work. But then if something really breaks, it's really if you're using a Salesforce, it's really on them to own that or to keep up with releases. So I would always prefer to do a hybrid.
No, that's a good point. Jill, I see you have something to share, so go for it.
I'm sorry. I was just going to add to that. So just from my experience, it's extremely difficult to find one solution partner that can solve all of your marketing technology challenges, right? And from a Brownability perspective, we're in Adobe as far as our back end of our website and our CMS platforms and a few of our analytics platforms, and we're Salesforce when it comes to CRM and marketing automation. And so it's really with these tech platforms, to Jamie's point, and you go into resources, right? And I think Stephen touched on it. We have very limited resources, and we have a number of projects and tech systems and business units to get stood up for and implement. So we have to truly look at, can we lean on these technology partners, and do they have an open API? There's always going to be some aspect that my team is responsible for building or for connecting and integrating and making sure that everything's functioning properly, or it's customized to fit our business needs. And what we're delivering to our audience and customers. But it truly goes back to that. When it comes to best of breed, how can the systems talk to each other, and can we get them to integrate to a place that we need? So it's kind of that mix of we're buying it and we're building it as well. But I always say we're borrowing it too, because we sometimes are using Zapier or other integrations to make sure that everything's connecting. But at the end of the day, that's our goal, is that we have the right resources, that we're considering that kind of people aspect of it and usability as well as connectivity.
And I think the one important takeaway from what you both shared is definitely remember there's no one solution that's going to solve for everything. As your business grows, technology needs grow. You're going to have to add on different pieces as your employees grow. All those things have to do with how you handle the technology that you bring in. And so, Stephen, if you could, give us your perspective on that as well, because I know you have a unique, organization and how you guys look at this.
Yeah, we aren't as mature, I would say, as as my counterparts on this panel. So yeah, I mean, like it's going to come down to the resources. Like, I think what's interesting about marketing now is like you really have to be like the head of the household to a certain extent. Obviously, you're not a C-level individual, at least in my role, but at least from the perspective, like, okay, what's the real talent in my organization? What's our strengths? What's our weaknesses? Where, how well do we work in a departmentally, like all these things that you want to factor in before you even do a commitment of this project of this size. And so, for us, we don't have the luxury of like, oh, there's already internal resources to kind of guide me through. So I kind of have to take it a lot slower, so if we invest in a software, yeah, like obviously with a lot of openness, like for example, our CMS platform is WordPress, it's open source. It would be easy for me to find a WordPress developer instead of like something proprietary like Adobe Experience Manager, right? And that cost also would be a lot higher to find a specialist within that AEM world. So, you just have to stay mindful of like, what are the other commitments that you're committing to when you kind of lock yourself into these decisions. And so like, like we have to stay just unfortunately with a more lean mindset when it comes to like this procurement process. And so we, like I can't just be like, oh yeah, this person on my team or this person within the organization is going to help take it to the next level. So, for us, it is mostly like, like this is what we're paying them for. They're supposed to be, the best in class or one of the best in class with this particular software, this particular piece that we're looking to invest in. And so let's just utilize this to help us get to the next stage. So, it is, but yeah, like you still have to sell the story of like, oh, this is all connected. This is phase one. Here's phase two. Here's what would be great if we had these things one day, like think about this. And so, like I know a big conversation that's really like a hot topic is marketing and sales alignment. And so obviously a lot of the tools that I look to procure are for, sales. It's not, for my own selfish wants and needs. So we joked earlier in a conversation how like marketers are like supposed to be the most selfless people in organization because we're just constantly looking to help and solve problems. And so, yeah, it really is. You really have to put yourself in that mindset of like just understanding that and making sure that you don't overcommit. And just be really mindful of like, oh no, I invested in this thing and now I'm stuck. And that's where it kind of like, because like for me, I constantly have to prove trust with the leadership team. So, when I'm asking for $5,000, 10 grand, 15, 25, like, as it scales up, like, obviously there's more visibility. But if you've shown trust throughout the whole process and do your due diligence, like, I think asking for something 6-figure contracts, like, it becomes less daunting to them because they understand that you vetted and you were very thorough and understood all aspects of the procurement process before you even made that recommendation.
Good point. So, Stephen, you talked a little bit about, kind of the back end, all the process. So we've talked as a group about building the roadmap, figuring out what the ROI is, getting the internal stakeholder alignment, having your champion in the room, and really thinking about whether you need to, borrow, buy, or build. What the audience has asked is really key now because they want to know what's the best techniques when you get to this point and you're ready to interview those Martech suppliers. What's the important information you need to be asking? How are you evaluating them? What kind of puts one ahead of the other? And I'll start with you, Stephen, on that.
Yeah, I think for us, it's like really the vendor who really understands our unique challenge for our all the pros and cons within our organization and what can be, because like all of them can sell the great features that they offer and tell you, we're best in class, blah blah. Here's a Gartner report of where we are within the quadrant. Yeah, quadrant. Yeah, it's like like to me that's not going to help us. Like like it really is like how. Yeah, to those points I kind of made earlier, like reinvest in this. What does that really mean? Does that mean we need to also try to outsource these kinds of talents? How easily will I be able to access that, or hire those talents who actually understand how to do this as well? I can speak to the web because it's WordPress, right? So it's been around forever. It's easier for me to find folks in that sense, and there's a level of comfort, and so. You just have to constantly think about that, like, and just not lose sight, and just get them to really break down like why, like within your environment would be the best solution. I do appreciate some of the vendors. I've definitely worked with a lot of AEs or SDRs even, who have been upfront about me, like, oh yeah, you guys aren't mature enough for our software. And you just want to be as honest as possible within that process as well. Like the more honesty and transparency you can provide the vendor, the more they can be like, oh yeah, we aren't a right fit, or you're going to be disappointed, or like don't get sucked into this like, oh, bells and whistles are nice, but if you aren't set up internally for it, it's not going to lead to success. And so you just want to be truthful about where you are as a company, who you are, and what kind of company you're trying to get to, but then also understand like and hopefully the vendor will be transparent within that process to you as well. So really get that dialogue before you even make that kind of commitment.
Jamie, any thoughts?
Yeah, so Stephen, I think that's kind of exactly in line with what I'm thinking. What I've done is really think about your most challenging use case and bring that to them. Don't hesitate to challenge them. Also, I would say the best thing is like when they come and do their pie in the sky sales pitch, which we've all seen, and then when we get the technology, we're like, this is not what I thought it was. So make sure you're bringing your use cases. Make sure that there's a tech person in the room when they come for the RFP, because what sometimes happens is they come in with a whole sales team, right? They want to win you over. They bring you lunch, great. But you want to make sure that there's a tech person on your side that's going to be doing the builds in the room, asking those tech questions so you're getting the answers, not so that they're going back and say, oh, we'll get back to you on that. So those are the things as we're talking about. If you need these hybrid solutions, if you need out of the box, then you talk about that. But again, as we think about growing, having their tech people and your tech people is important. And again, making sure that there is also a commitment that if you're buying it day one, what is their commitment of your growth? After that, what is the support after that is equally as important, that they're not just going to be like, okay, you signed our SOW, see you later. You want to make sure either you're investing in hours for them to help you onboard, but also what does that process look like? If it's a 5-term agreement, what does that look like are they held accountable for the utilization of your products?
Jill, any thoughts?
I'll just add to that. I think Stephen said it earlier, and probably everybody that's listening to this gets hit up on LinkedIn or email at least 100 times a day by an SDR trying to sell you a software platform. And so to Stephen's point, it's all about, for me upfront, making sure that I've clearly outlined what are our goals, what are our evaluation criteria, what are we looking for, what do we need to accomplish. If we're replacing a tech system, in that instance, I will maybe do a reverse demo. We do a lot of those of where do our problems lie? Can we show that to you? Can we walk through it? As Stephen said, I try to keep them very honest. Everybody on this call is probably in the same place of I often find the best information comes from users, and not the ones that they recommend me talk to, but the actual users that I meet that are they're platform users that are in there every day. And so I'm encouraging my team members to seek out those people that are utilizing the tool in the same way that they would be, and that have gone through that implementation, as Jamie said. And we don't purchase anything until we've talked to at least 3 of those. And that helps us with our implementation and kind of identify roadblocks before we go up. I also am very cautious to be somebody upfront and new to test something out. And so, we're always reading Trust Radius and G2 and evaluations. And as Jamie said, it's really, we're looking for a partner, somebody that's going to be there after the implementation. We're just too small and too nimble to take on a software platform without having support. And as Stephen mentioned, somebody that we can trust, that's not just trying to sell us something, but that's actually going to be a partner and really want to grow our business and truly understand what our needs are. And then, of course, going through all that criteria and those questions that you're asking them throughout to evaluate and make sure that you're getting the right partner.
Yeah, and just wanted to piggyback off of that real quick. It's like support is huge. I mean, like for our company, right? Like when we're investing in this software, all eyes are on me. And they're like, oh, you made that decision. So, like the success of that tool rides on me, regardless if that's fair or not. So, like, and I don't know and an audience who's also in that shoes is like, this is a big decision. And so you just like, I would tend to lean to the organization where I felt like they had better support, even if they had less functionality or, weren't as great with what they're selling with their bells and whistles, because like at the end of the day, like, yeah, the success of the tool is how great their support team is, their customer success team, or any of those other roles on the back end, on the day-to-day side, that's really going to help you get to the next level. Because like, at the end of the day, like, like some of these contracts, like at least in my world, always starts with 1 year. So you literally have a year to proof of concept of like, oh, this is great, this is not great, this is not the right tool for us, here's how we decide whether we want to go take it to the next level. So you really have to have a great support on the vendor side in order to succeed, especially in a company like mine.
Well, guys, we want to give a little bit of time for the questions that we've gotten from the audience, and there are quite a few. So I'm going to try to rapid fire through these so we can get as many as we can in our final 10 minutes. But Stephen, you just spoke about value and getting trying to get that value in that 1 year. And a question did come up to ask, what type of commitment from a terms and conditions timeframe would you guys suggest to show value? So, this question came in, they said they encountered some where they had annual commitments, but because trends and changes happen in platforms, they're just wanting to get a thought on, what would you typically say in far as terms of a time frame to start to see real value in implementation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the commitment into it, right? Like, I mean, like some of these implementations, they can't just, it's not turnkey. So, it's going to take a huge team or investment on the resource side, on the internal side, on the external side, and then, go live is like maybe like 6 months now, a year from now. Like, so obviously those are bigger investments in that standpoint. So you really have to kind of consider, like, will that, if I've invested a year into implementing it and then we only sign a 1 year contract, like, am I really going to give that up after I involve like, thousands of man hours, like into that process? And the reality of that is probably not, right? Because people are going to like, oh my gosh, you just spent all this money, not only on the licensing, but of this, and now you're talking about a newer software. So on my, procurement, they're on a smaller scale. So, it really is like, I mean, it does take a lot of research on your end, right? As an individual, as a person in a marketing role, to really think about like, okay, where are we trying to go? Will this truly align? Like, can this truly get us to where our leadership team has defined the goals for the company? And if this will at least take me to point A to point B, then yeah, I can, at least it'll get me there so that I can get what I really want later on once I've proven that there's value in that thing. So you really have to kind of piecemeal it in that mindset of not like, oh, we're, this is best in class, so we're definitely going to commit to it for a long term. It really is like, on mine, yeah, like, like everything is just on a smaller scale. So it's just like, as long as this will help me like get to the next stage, like, then I can ask for the next tier of software. But, for now, this will be good enough, and I can show that this has done its purpose and stuff like that. And I can extend if we're not even ready, right? Because like back to everyone's point, like it's like, if you're growing and knocking out all these goals and aligning with the enterprise, but the enterprise still hasn't grown, or your team hasn't grown, or IT resources hasn't grown, then like the reality of bringing something bigger, more complex that involves more resources, you're still not going to be successful with that. So just, like I don't know if I really answered the question, but be mindful. Like it just depends. Like it really depends. Like
Well,
at least in
no,
my
I
use
think
case.
it's good feedback. And I would add to that, Jill, if you could, kind of give your perspective on it, but also talk about how are you measuring it? So what KPIs you might be using to implement?
Yeah. So to add on to Stephen, for us, there's a proof of concept phase that I try to do in discovery with that partner before we sign up. And for me, it's really about future proofing. And I think somebody on this call asked it of, I'm hesitant to get into contracts anything over 2 years. But at the same time, if I'm going to spend the money on depending on the size of the scale of the software tool, I want to make sure it's the right decision. And so put the legwork in up front to make sure it's right. But then to your point, when it comes to KPIs, we're really looking on, depending at the size of the tool, like how are we reporting that back to people? And we always follow, just as all of you probably do, crawl, walk, run methodology, start small and get bigger. But at the same time, we have to be proving value. And so going back to that, I think I mentioned earlier, the business value matrix tool that we utilize, and there's also a value complexity tool that we use in that, of how is it performing, and check in early. And that's what I found is, set up that first initial phase, get it live, be agile, look at your results. And so what is our customer retention? What's our customer lifetime value? Whatever that tool stack is really trying to accomplish, take a look at those key metrics and make sure that you're measuring those, and that you can measure them out of the gate and then report them up into those different stakeholder teams. And so I think Stephen mentioned a roadmap. We have a roadmap, but we also have very robust dashboards. And so automating reports out to the key stakeholders and following up on those cadence calls, just like you would a product launch. So we treat the software implementation plans just like we treat an engineering product launch, in the manner of what's the 30, 60, 90, what's the 3-month, 6-month, 12-month check-in, right? How are we doing? How are we performing? How is this getting value back to the business? And to Stephen's point, that helps us with budget later, right? Marketing's often the first place that gets cut when it comes to a budget standpoint, or it feels like that. So this helps us in the long run with the suite of really proving the value of what we are implementing. And to the contract point, if something isn't working, or you got it and it just was the wrong decision, how can you pivot quickly and make it better, or go back and make a different choice? And I think having those metrics and KPIs set up in a way that you can report on them regularly once you get started is so key for that.
And I see that we have a question, because we've been saying the word stakeholder a lot and champions a lot. And there was a question around, who are the people that should be kept in the room, should be involved? Is sales one of those people? And Jamie, I want you to talk a little bit more, because you talked about the champions and the key people. Who should be included in this process?
Anyone that is going to benefit from this product. So if sales, let's just take CRM. CRM could have many different facets. There could be plugins from your CRM to the sales team. What if they use part of Salesforce to make their sales calls? Maybe they have auto dialing and they have incoming. If you have customer service and you have inbound calls, you might want to have somebody from your customer service. So I look at as any part of your technology that's going to touch any other part of your organization and their technology. You're going to want their tech person and the head of that area of their business, because again, you're going to need all hands on deck. Because again, if you're not doing your due diligence and sales is like, this makes my job harder, then you're going to get a lot of pushback. Maybe, when we look at technology, it's all about efficiency. So just kind of another KPI that we use, not to jump around, but just the KPI is efficiency, right? So technology is supposed to make our jobs easier. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but it is. So I think it's about making sure of the effectiveness of everyone that's involved. So whether that's the sales, if you're manufacturing, it could be warehouse, it could be your orders. If you have to report back into analytics and people are using Tableau, have your data science member there, because all of these are going to somehow touch. So it may seem like a lot, but guaranteed, if you're doing the upfront legwork of having everybody in that room and on board, it's going to be easier when you're going into implementation and having that buy-in.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This has been a great discussion and great information. So I appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us today.
Great. Thank you, panel, for that insightful panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today for this excellent session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. This officially concludes the Martech Leadership Forum, Smarter Tech for Marketing Success. Special thanks to our sponsor, Sitecore. Thanks again for joining us today and engaging in our content. Have a great rest of your day.